Yeah, you guys may have seen this video before. It's been floating around for a couple of years, but it really describes relationships. It's stereotypical. It's real stereotypical to male and females, but it really explains the point. It really does. So check it out.
Pressure, you know, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're not...
Okay, fine. I mean, listen, fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
So I have to keep on talking till I can go on. We can work it out. We can work it out.
I've seen that a bunch of times. Every time I see it, I love it. I just love it because it really does explain couples. No, I don't need that anymore. My name is, just real quick introduction, Jimmy Pitts. I've been with our church for a couple of decades now. And I'm a pastor there, love our community. I serve with Weber Fire. I've been doing it for a couple of years, so thank you so much for letting me in your hood over here. It feels good. And I love doing it. I love it when they call me. Like Roy, they call me frequently here and there, depending on what's going on. And so I just love what I do. One of the things Roy and I have the privilege of doing so often is marriages. I think we compete to do about 10 or 15 a year, and that's a lot of weddings. And when we do a lot of weddings, a lot of times we'll do our own counseling, pre-counseling. And with a church our size, we have a ton of counseling generally in marriage. And so I'm just my background. I'm 52. I've got 3 daughters. One's married. One's getting married in April. I have 2 grandsons. My daughters are 24, 26, and 28, so I got a little bit of life history going on with me, good and bad. And so I think some of the things I share about marriage, they are not things I have done right. And they are things I'm still learning. Because I think all of us, we come into this relationship where we think, initially we fall in love with someone. And the question is, how do we fall in love with someone? I think you're sitting in a room, you're just in an environment, all of a sudden you see an attraction, this thing called attraction kind of comes up in all of us towards a person. At that point, you're starting to get connected to this person. Once you get connected, it seems like you actually your entire time is consumed with them, at least to begin with. If you guys can remember back, or if you're in the middle of that, it's 100% where you're just thinking, dreaming, sleeping. You have this thing called being in love, and you fall in love. And when you fall in love, you're consumed with that amount of time and what's going on. But then there's this guy named C.S. Lewis. He's actually a Christian theologian, philosopher too. He says, there's a difference in being in love and staying in love. How many know that? And that's so we know how to fall in love real easy. In fact, you may have friends, or it may even be you. The being in love becomes like they're so addicted to that euphoria high of just that feeling of falling in love so much that you may know people who have gone from relationship to relationship to relationship because they can fall in love, but they can't stay in love because it's a whole another ball game, and it's a difficult ball game. It's really difficult. So C.S. Lewis says that staying in love is actually the more difficult part, and it feels differently. And so it requires a little more work. I think it requires a lot more work, to be honest. I think managing a relationship on top of what you guys do on a regular basis with the stress, like Roy was talking about coming home, it's not even compared. It's not even compared to what an everyday person goes through. You guys have so much to deal with, especially with the way your shifts rotate. I mean, that's just very difficult on family. I don't know what the divorce rate is among the fire department in society. It's 50% or a little higher now. And so one out of every other marriage gets divorced. And it becomes very difficult for marriages to maintain that. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think what are the top things you think people get divorced over?
Money.
Money? Money's a big one. Yeah, you got spenders and non-spenders, you put them together and you got tension. So, like my mom and dad, I love them to death. They're still married. How they made it this far, I don't know. My dad's 80. But one day, this is how good they are with money, talking about it. My dad comes home, buys a truck, doesn't tell my mom. The same day my mom brings home a dog, doesn't tell my dad. And then neither one of them talk about it. And that's just not a healthy environment, though. Because money brings stress, but they don't want to talk about it. But why don't they want to talk about it?
Because it brings stress.
Tension, fight. No, man, it's a huge stressor. Huge stressor in marriage. What else for divorce? Facebook, social media, a new phenomenon. But it's also texting, right? Because it's not just Facebook, it's the accessibility now that we have to people from our past. Where before, let's say we had a past, we even past relationships. Once you close the door, you're out. You just have to send a letter, right, to people. No, it's just a simple text. All you have to do is find them on Facebook, kind of private message them, and then all of a sudden you're in the arena with people of your past where perhaps you shouldn't have been, or we shouldn't have been, or our spouse shouldn't have been. And so the connection there it adds a huge amount of tension to relationships. What else?
Back to trust, doesn't it?
Huh?
That still goes hand in hand with trust.
The truck?
No, not trust.
Trust
Yeah,
is
I
a
mean, I
big
like
one.
trust,
I'm like, a
but-
truck? What happened to a truck? Who bought a truck? Somebody here?
Truck, horse trailer.
Yeah, trust is a big one. Trust is a big one. When you first fall in love, I mean, you trust each other completely. That's why you're getting married. But then as time goes on, that trust gets broken and you have to build it back up a lot of times. Money's a big one. I think blended families is a huge stress. Going into a relationship with a blended family or creating a blended family will heighten anything, especially if she has kids or you have kids and they don't have kids, the tension just goes up. It'll be your number one fighting issue, guaranteed. Guaranteed. And it can work, but it will be the number one fighting. In-laws. Anybody have a problem with in-laws?
No, they're all dead.
Yeah. Just say it like it is, a little dark humor. That's awesome.
Used to.
My in-laws live 3 blocks from me. My parents live about 10 blocks from me. You know, in-laws become an issue if they're involved in your marital life, trying to make your decisions for you, or if they're in close proximity. If they're in close proximity, it totally works as long as you have clean boundaries. If you don't have defined boundaries with in-laws, it's just a recipe waiting to happen, man. It really is. What else?
I think back on the Facebook thing, it's comparing to other people.
Mm-hmm.
They could, your wife's sitting there looking at everybody going on vacation and all that. It looks all fancy.
She's not living with them.
Right.
Right.
But in, like, their relationship is probably just pretty close like yours. You're not like 100% with each other all the time. So they pretend, people pretend that saying they're having a good time, but who knows?
That's
and
good.
then your wife sees it and they're like, oh, they're so happy, blah, blah, blah. Why aren't we that way? And then realistically, they're the same. They're just pretending.
Yeah, it's a glorified relationship, basically, when you're looking on any social media. People who come together often and they meet on social media, whether it's online, dating and all that, and those things, they do work sometimes. But the thing is, when they don't know each other. Because anytime they get mad, what do? If they're especially distance. Oh yeah, I'm going to go, bye. They're not living with that person. And so when you come close into proximity to anyone, you start to see their baggage. Who comes into marriage with baggage?
Everybody.
Everyone. Every one of us has issues when we come into a relationship. Some we know about, some we don't know about. Some we actually see in our spouse, some we don't know. And so when Roy and I do you know, premarital counseling for a lot of couples, especially if the one's already trying to change the other before they do this thing called marriage. Is that good? Heck no. They're not even ready for this then. Because really the reality is you accept that person, including their baggage, as best as you know. You don't come in trying to change it. Now there's always something to work on. But you don't come in with those kind of deals and trying to make it work thinking, you know, we'll come together or this person will change later on in the relationship. That's not even fair to them. But I think we all have a tendency to do that later on in the relationship when we see things on social media. Oh, I wish they were like that, or they promised me this, and they're just following through on a regular basis. Unsolved conflicts are really bad. Unsolved conflicts. I mean, they're like a cesspool of just problems and problems and problems. And a lot of times we don't want to deal with it as, you know, especially, what are your guys' shifts here? Like how long you on, how long you off?
It's the 48-96. Like
Oh, you're the 48.
Like Weaver just went to.
Yeah, because Weaver was 1 on, 1 off, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's 48 now. So when you go home, the last thing sometimes you guys want to do is deal with what? Conflicts, problems, getting fights with your spouse, having to try to talk about this stuff. But it's important for them, so they're going to bring it up maybe. Because like you've been gone for 2 days, so what we're going to do now? Now we have to talk about it. The worst thing though is my wife, she brings it up at bedtime. You guys ever do that or seen that? Had that happen to you? You're laying in bed, you're just about asleep. You know, and they're like, "Whoa, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me, man? Like now?" And so hey, we have a real clean rule that you cannot do that. And if you do that, the other person can say, "You know what? It's too late. We're not going to fight about it right now," because that's like tension right there. I am going to sleep, but I have to bring it up tomorrow, and I cannot ignore it. And so it is on the person, whoever kind of calls the time out, to bring it up. And so usually I can fall asleep, and my wife, she's just ticked at that point and can't sleep, man. She's just so mad. But the thing is, there are things and rules like that to set out. Communication is a huge barrier. And I love meeting with couples. I mean, I cannot tell you, I absolutely love it. And especially young couples, when they're first getting married, they're both 19, 20, 21, whatever it is. And when they're first together and you're talking to them, you're talking about communication and everything, and they're like, "We're such good communicators." You're like, "Oh yeah."
This way.
Huh?
They're good communicators this way.
Yeah, they are this way.
They're very good.
100% this way. And they all think they're good. "Oh yeah, I always explain my emotions, my feelings. We always talk things through." How many times do you guys fight? "Well, we really haven't fought, but we're good communicators because that's why we don't fight." I'm like, man, it's just what? What is waiting to happen there? A fight. We all know that because most of us have been there. And it's just a matter of the time. And so communication is a big problem within most couples, and it's just going to, you know, and it creates problems if it goes unresolved. It's a big divorce breaker. Communication. Sex is another one, meaning infidelity. And it causes, of course, that's a huge rift. That usually does not, marriages don't recover from that very often. And so I think when we come into a relationship and we see these things, there's some things we can look at to actually kind of preempt and kind of try to actually divorce-proof our marriage to some extent. Because when we come in a relationship, when I talked about, you guys came together, you spent all the time, if you had two circles, like two giant circles, you overlapped your time together because that's the glue that needed to happen to bring you together. Or it wouldn't happen. That's what made you guys get married to someone versus everybody else, is that time had to overlap. And it's the texting, the talking, everything like that that becomes heightened during that time period. But then naturally what happens over a period of time in any relationship, and this is naturally, it what? Yeah, it separates, it grows apart, right? When it gets too far apart, it's called roommates. Anybody ever been divorced or broke up from a relationship, guarantee you, every single one of them said, "Well, we just became roommates," and it doesn't work. And so part of the goal in the relationship that you guys have, that I work on, that Roy works on in his own, is bringing those circles back together so you can overlap that time again and have that reconnection with them. Your relationship, the way I compare it and heard it compared in the past, is like a bank. So when you first meet someone, you fall in love, you're making all these deposits, right? Massive deposits. Doing things, enjoying each other, and so it's all these deposits. But then when you get a fight, what is it? Withdrawal. Absolute withdrawal. And you guys go at each other, start butting heads, unresolved conflict, things come up, bad communication, sarcasm when you're fighting. Everyone thinks sarcasm is funny until it's used at you during a fight. Then it's not pretty. But then for sure it's sarcasm and things. So then there's all these withdrawals. You have too many withdrawals, what happens? Divorce. Yeah, it's bankrupt. Yeah, it's going to go bankrupt. An overdraft, won't stay together. In today's world, it doesn't work. In today's society, divorce is too easy. And you can do it. And you can move on. But then there's a huge fallout in the process. That's emotionally damaged to yourself and other people and sometimes kids. And that's a hard thing to recover from. And it takes a little time. It really does. And so part of the things here that I'm trying to just say and look at as we look at our relationships is you know, there's this guy who actually did a study. It's called the 5 Love Languages. That's that handout that you guys have. It's pretty right on. How many have heard of it before? It's been around for a while. And I would say it's actually pretty true. Now, so what this concept is saying is everyone has a love language. And it's different per person, or maybe same, but you may have 1 or 2 heightened areas of your love language. Love language, if you have a particular love language, and this is true, if this were not met, what would happen is you would actually feel to your core, not your personal feelings, you know, hurt, to your core, you would feel like you're not being loved. And so when you look at this, think of who you are in respect to, you have to have this in order to know that you're loved by that person that you have brought into your life. Acts of service. Now this sounds very materialistic, but it's very true. I know people like this. It means you are loved. You feel more loved by this person is when they do something for you. And you may be married to this, you may actually be this. A lot of guys are this, acts of service. Doing something for them means a tremendous amount. It means you love me. You care about my relationship. I know that I'm loved by you because you do this, this, and this. And I love it. So when you do something, it's like over the top for them. And they feel that compassion. So being married to someone who has acts of service and you're not doing it, what is that saying to them? You're going to love them. And you may hear some reverb, like, you never do anything for me, you know, I don't feel loved by you. And so, but it's all centered around this acts of service in your relationship with them. Quality time. Now this one's going to be tough for you. Because if you're married to a quality time person, why is that tough for you?
You don't have a lot of it.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of it. Where are you? Half the time. Here. And so, and I've seen this a bunch of times. I think in your guys' department, it's really, really rough. Not department, but field. Because you're on to, and then you're off. You know, if you're married to a quality and quantity, because it deals with quantity with those people too. They want your time. And if you're not, sometimes like when a relationship first meets, one has, you know, you first met, like I said, you spend all that time together. This person definitely has that love language of quality, quantity, time. And then the drifting starts a little bit, and then it's like, well, I just feel like I'm smothered by the person. That they can't do anything without me. But what they're not recognizing is actually, it's what? It's their gift. It's who they are. It's how they express love. They want time with you, and they want lots of time with you. If you're married to someone, you know, that has this, and you're in your field right now, there's just a conversation that needs to be taking place probably with them, that you recognize them. Because it's going to be hard for them at times. And they just need to talk about it with you. Physical touch. Physical touch is a big one. And this is just like constant touch, constant intimacy, holding hands, going down the road. And, you know, and in some cases for guys or girls, it's like, you know, I just don't want to be touched that much. I just don't like it. The only time my wife does not like me, you know, at all reaching towards her or touching her is when we're fighting. And man, when I first got married and I lit her up pretty good over something, I remember we were fighting. And, you know, and I'm a physical touch guy. So I just reach over, hey, honey, it's okay. And she's like, don't you touch me right now. I mean, she is ticked. Because for her, that is not communicating. That is not my core. Do not touch me. I am mad. Give me space, all that. But to a person whose love language is touch, and I reach to her, even during fighting, to touch her, to comfort her, who am I really comforting?
You.
Me. Yeah, it's me. I'm thinking it's for her, but it's actually for me because I'm more touch. And then all of a sudden, she pulls for me. What does that say to me?
You're not
She
loved.
doesn't.
I'm not loved, and it goes to my core. And so we had to have a conversation because that sends such rejection to me. I'm like, fine, you want me to touch you? I won't touch you again. I'll wait for it till you ask to be touched, right? Those are the kind of the things we go into in those modes because we get defensive and mad. And so then we pull away, which creates a horrible scenario. So I had to just say, hey, when we fight, I got to have a conversation with you. I want to touch you. She's like, give me some space. I'm like, okay. And so that way I know where we are and where we stand, but it has to be clarified. Receiving gifts. Receiving gifts. I know several people like this that when, to say that you love me is you buy things for me. And it's not just like, new cars, trucks, whatever. It's just things. But it shows an appreciation for that person. And they feel so appreciated. They feel so loved when you just remember them. And randomly, you bring them things. And sometimes it is flowers, sometimes it's other things. But it's actually receiving gifts. And then the last one on these things is words of affirmation. Words of affirmation is a huge one. Because words of affirmation has a dark side. A very, very big dark side. Words of affirmation are some people who are married, where you're constantly saying, I love you every time you go out the door, every time you get off the phone, I love you. My father-in-law is not a words of affirmation. And he thinks he said I love you on our wedding day, and he'll say it maybe every anniversary. And this is very true of who he is. And because he believes that, why would you say it that often? And because then it becomes meaningless. But to a person who has that gift or that need for words of affirmation, how often do you need it?
Pretty constantly.
Yeah, constantly, especially during a fight. Yeah, all the time. Are we still good? Do you still love me? And it's not really you're saying that, but you're actually looking for the affirmation of it. And so they need a constant, and some people will say they're insecure. But I don't believe they're insecure. I think it's just part of who they are. They just need those words, the constant affirmation. And so, of understanding, but there's a dark side to it. So what it makes you, I believe, if you're words of affirmation, it makes you also word sensitive. Anybody here word sensitive? I am. Sure. I know I am. And so words of encouragement go a long, long ways with me. But what's the dark side to it?
They hurt you pretty
Oh
bad.
yeah, they hurt me pretty bad. And so the wrong words, or the words that actually, in a fight, a conversation, or taking a dig at each other during a fight, can actually go pretty far too, and send a tremendous amount of rejection to me. And this is crazy because this is whether it's in the workplace, at home, with my kids, that all of a sudden you'll just start to harbor the hurt. And then it creates a bad scenario for the relationship. Guys usually just start to check out. All of us start to check out if we get hurt too much. We start to get hurt. So words of affirmation. So what you guys can do on this, which is pretty important, is if you haven't done it, just hop online. There's like 1,000 tests for this. You can just take a 2-minute test. It'll run you through. It doesn't have to be this website. It can be another one. And you can take the test with your spouse, go through it. Once you do it, it actually sets you up to understand each other better, even if you think you know each other. And so my encouragement is, what we do in life is so incredible. As we take these things called cars, vehicles, houses, things that we purchase and buy. If you love purchasing and buying those things and you value those things, what do you do with them? You take care of them. You change the oil. Your vehicles here, I know, just like Weaver Fire, you're constantly doing maintenance on it, right? I mean, it's standard. You have to. But then I find in our daily relationships with people, and this is especially of the ones we love the most, we seldom, and I mean seldom, take the time to do the maintenance and to come back around. We spend far more time in other areas of our life acting like we value it, and I'm not saying we don't value it, but acting like we value it, rather than the most important relationships in life. Becoming a better parent. That means actually reading on it, studying it, talking about it. Becoming a better husband or wife. It means reading, studying, whatever it is. And so when when I do the marriages for couples, I say, you know what I want? I want you to call me or text me on your anniversary. And because I won't remember it, you will. And then set up a meeting. So we can just do a checkup. Because we changed the oil in our cars, our vehicles, and all that. I go, let's just do a checkup and make sure you're good. How many call me?
Very few.
Yeah, I'm talking about like, out of all the weddings I've done over almost 2 decades, like maybe 3 or 4. And I tell every couple this. And I had one a couple of weeks ago, said, hey, it's time for a checkup. And I'm like, awesome, they remember. They're going to do it. Because I'm not going to like put them down and try to destroy them. I'm going to try to give them tools to make sure they're still on target to succeed. Everyone gets married to stay married. No one gets married to get divorced. But what are we doing to invest in it? And so this is just stereotypical for the most part, okay? When a problem happens in a relationship and it starts going south, who's usually calling me? A male or female into my office? The wife. Yeah, the wife. She's usually fighting for it. Because for some reason, guys just hit autopilot and they're just cruising in that relationship. And they're great when it breaks down, right? When it breaks down, man, we're all in. We got to fix this, make sure. And then they're usually good for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then we're back to the same routine, going to whatever it was, and we're just hearing the same thing. Because ultimately, all relationships are going to hit conflict. They're going to hit something. But guys, for the most part, just don't have that same investment as women. Women will fight for the relationship 90% of the time, I believe, unless there's some other external force like maybe abuse or they fell in love with someone else. It's mainly guys who, if they just stay invested, say, hey, honey, I want to read a book about marriage tonight. Would you want to do that? Like, can we read a chapter? What are they going to say? That's a deposit, guys. That is a deposit. 100%, because they love the connection, I love the connection, you'll love the connection. They're gifted at it far better than men. I mean, they really are at the connecting part, the intimacy part. And so, for example, you get a bunch of guys together, we're all going camping, maybe it's a bachelor party, whatever else, and so we're out at, North Fork, just hanging out by a campfire, and we're all just having a blast, telling stories, sharing about our day. And all of a sudden, one guy in the campfire starts crying. And he says, well, I was at work today, and my feelings got hurt, and my boss hurt my feelings, and here we were just being guys, hanging out, having the best time. And so who brought this guy to our camp who is bawling? All right, what are we going to do? We're going to throw him in the fire and his friend and say, don't ever come back, okay? That's what we're going to do, because that's not our time for that. Plus a guy saying, you hurt my feelings? I mean, who does that? Guys just don't do that. However, take the same scenario, and this is not in every case, but it's most cases. Take the same scenario, and you have women, and they've all gone out. They're all sitting around the fire. One of them starts crying. My boss hurt my feelings. What takes place? Yeah.
That boss turns into
Oh yeah, they're all cuddling, taking care of each other. They go to an emotional level that we do not like that, and they accept it. And we have to recognize in our marriage that that's called a connection, and that's intimacy. They can relate like that so fast. But what guys do, for the general part, is when we get mad and our feelings get hurt, what do? We get angry. Walls go up and we get angry. Anger is only that exterior thing that say, rather than telling our spouse, oh, honey, you hurt my feelings so bad. We don't say that. We're just ticked. And so we come out on this arrogant, angry side. We turn it against them like they did something when it's actually our issue. We just got our feelings hurt. We just don't want to say it. But women will say it in a heartbeat. And they're actually excellent communicators on their emotions and feelings, generally, than guys. There are some guys who are good at it, and there's some girls who need to improve it, but generally it's just like that. It works. And so in our relationships, and as you guys go forward, express what you feel. Express what's really going down deep in you, not that just exterior emotions. If you get angry, ask yourself what? Why am I so angry? And I hate it because I have to do it with my wife. I have to say, yeah. And she'll say it now, did I hurt your feelings? And it's so hard for me to say what?
No.
Yes, I know. I don't even want to say it because it makes me vulnerable in a weird way. I'd rather say no. No, I'm fine. But I have to say yes. And it sucks because I have to go to those places because it's uncomfortable for me, but it's better for my relationship by far. And so as relationships move, and they move towards each other, there's a thing that women have in describing that fire scene. They have a thing that's called connection and intimacy that is unbelievable. When they're dragged into my office, the guys, most of the time, that connection's already starting to kind of shift. There's something going on. And so guys just have a tendency to deal with it. They get withdrawn, they get quiet, they get bitter. In some cases, if the wife is an external processor, she's getting louder and getting more bitey because things are not getting done, and he's just withdrawn. And so it creates this once again, this scenario for just a horrible situation to take place, which is called divorce. And so the goal, of course, is that guys can express their emotions, express their feelings, like talking about coming home, about what you feel. Women, for the most part, love to hear what goes on in your life. Men do too. You guys should be, no matter who your spouse is, you should be sharing what goes on too. You may have to filter it though. That's the difference with you. Is that, unfortunately working in a church, sometimes we get dark sides. We have things happen to us, not at the same level of you, but sometimes you just get emotionally drained. People saying things to you and so my wife can tell sometimes if something went on. Sometimes most of the time I'll tell her. I'm much better at it, but sometimes I have to filter what I'm saying. But she wants to hear it. That's the key point. She really, really wants to hear it. Now my wife, she's an external processor. And so when she's happy or mad, okay, she's processing. If you were to meet her, you would think she is completely shy because she's quiet. And she's more shy on that level. But when you know her, man, she will tell you everything. So this is a true scenario. You want to divorce-proof your marriage and work on just keeping it to withstand the pressures of the world. When she gets off work, and she was working at Layton, Fairfield Surgical Rehab, she'd get off work. She would call me just before she left the building, and we live in Ogden by Ogden High, so it's about 15, 20-minute drive depending on traffic and the time of day. She'd be like, hey honey, I'm just getting off work, and I promise you it's just like this. She's not even out of the building. Okay, yeah, this is what happened today, and she starts telling me all her routine, everything she went through, everything that took place that day. She's just talking about everything. Gets home, and she's driving, hi honey, I'm in the driveway. And I'm like, great, okay. She hangs up the phone, I open the back door, she comes in, what does she do again?
Tells you everything.
Everything all over again. And this is no exaggeration. But I love it, because that's her. And she's going to go through the whole thing again. Now, what do we do sometimes in scenarios like that, no matter who your spouse is? We start to check out. But she's an external processor. She needs that in order to process her day. It's very meaningful for her to be able to share her day. But in response, what does she want from me?
Active listening.
Yeah, active listening. Active listening, right?
Nice.
Is active?
No.
And we know these things. We know what should we do with them when our spouse comes in the room? Talk to me, right? We should. But we're so hooked on them, no matter what it is, that they become such a distraction. And now I think there are barriers in marriage. I remember the good old days, because I'm older than some of you, that they said, man, just watching TV, you guys need to read a book together. So stop watching TV. Mm-hmm. TV would become the thing that would destroy marriages because nobody's talking anymore and all that. Now it's like, can we just go back to watching TV together? Because when we're not even watching TV, we're just listening to TV in the same bed, not even talking. And I'm not saying that's always bad, but there needs to be parameters, I think, and rules to help deal with the conflict or when the other person is not listening. My wife and I have a red rule. When the other person is coming home, walks in the door, if we haven't talked to each other, or if the other person just starts talking Now, if I'm doing something, I can say, honey, let me just finish this one text and I'll put it down. And it's good. I'll put it down and listen. But if I'm not, then she can call me out on it and I can call her out on it of like, you know what? You need to put the phone down. And I don't get defensive or mad because we've already stated the rule. What's the rule? When the other person's talking, the phone goes down. And it works. And it's healthy for the environment.
I think phones I think this whole age, I think we can almost sometimes are too connected to each other. Like, I think my parents, they've been married 63 years, so going strong. And they, you know, when my dad went to work, my dad just went to work. They didn't have contact all day long.
Right.
My dad was gone for 8 or 9 hours, and he'd come home and they would talk about their day, and they hadn't talked about the day the whole day through 75 texts and
Right.
you know what I mean? So they
Right.
would come home and then they'd have that connection time when he came home, and then he'd go out and work in the yard and mom would cook dinner. It was pretty traditional family, you know, growing up. But
Sure.
I think now it's like, you know, you're never not in contact with each other. Like you almost don't learn to just be separate people sometimes. And I almost think that connection is sometimes too much to where you need sometimes that space. It helps you to appreciate each other more when you're together. And if you're never apart, sometimes I think it causes more conflict.
Sometimes, you know, you can savor moments in the middle of it. You know, you can wait for something, so the anticipation builds what you're talking about. So you come home, you get to share everything.
Right.
Because there's an anticipation there that actually is kind of nice. But I agree, a lot of times there's no more anticipation because everything's already on the table.
It's all instant.
Yeah, it's instant. I
Right
used to
there
go,
all the
well, I
time.
still go overseas. 20 years ago when I was going overseas, back in the day, man, it was barely even email then. I mean, you would go offline and you would go dark. No news is what? Good news. That's right, 100%. No worries. And so now, I'm not even I'm in the jungles of either Guatemala or India, and they're living in huts. And what's everyone doing? They all have phones. They all have phones. Now, it's a different plan. They all buy their time rather than doing plans, but they have access to phones like no other.
They don't have running water, but they have phones.
Yeah, I know, they don't have clean water, but they do have a phone. Yeah. And what's crazy is now, when I go overseas, I'm accessible as much there as I am here, which it used to be nice because I used to go dark. And you can kind of decompress a little bit because everyone's looking for a time to decompress. And so it does add, these will add and have, and they're not going away, a different scenario into our relationship. So the question is now that they exist and they're not going away in our lives and our kids' lives, how do we manage them? You know, and and that's going to be different from couple to couple based upon the couple's needs.
Well, there's this expectation too, like you get a text and if you don't reply right
Yeah.
away, you're ignoring them or
I agree.
you know what I mean? And it's like, no, like
No.
sometimes I just don't want to reply.
I agree 100%. There is that expectation now. There's expectation from our entire church that sometimes they text you, why didn't you text me back? But have you ever seen the custom texts on Apples? Where they call and you just hit the little button that says message, you can send them. Mine says, I'm in confession. Please pray for me. I just sent them that. Even if I don't know him, if it's a number I don't know, I'm like, yep, okay. They'll either call me back or won't.
He sends that to me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in confession with you, that's why now.
I hear you in the other room, Jimmy.
He shuts his door so often. He does hear me too much. I'm the loud one on staff. But the problem we have in our society is what I think society projects as what a healthy relationship is. If you go to movies, right? If you look out there in the world and just see what it's telling you is a healthy or an unhealthy relationship, what's it doing? How long do you stay together? Until what? Until you're not happy. It's not the commitment. It all of a sudden folds out into, well, if I'm not happy with you anymore, there's no more this thing of working things out. It becomes a thing. You guys need to go? Go ahead. There it is.
Ambulance 52, responding to medical. 1419. 1419.
And so if you can look at society, movies, TV, everything, and how many here know who Nicholas Sparks is? Okay. Never heard of him? we wish we would have never heard of him. The guy writes these novels that a lot of people read, and then he gets them picked up by, movies, and man, that guy needs counseling. Bad. I am not kidding. What he does every time, and my wife loves these movies.
Sappy.
What he does every time is he creates a scenario to where there's a couple, almost always there's a couple, and it's a bad relationship. And then he creates something else over here to where you want them to like each other, but not the couple to work things out. And so what happens in the Nicholas Sparks movies often is you're wanting the people who are not married to make sure that they don't work it out, but you want to fall in love with the other one, but then he ends up killing the other one, and then it never works out. And it's almost true in all his movies. They're very tragic. And he'll make you like them, and then he'll kill them every time. But this is the way society, so people are watching these movies, going to the theaters, seeing these things that are taking place, and then often thinking what their own personal relationship should be what? Like that. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not. It's across the street. 58-year-old male in the house with Scots. I'm thinking, oh, that's what we were saying. Getting ready to get on the airplane and he had the big one. What? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Real close to our assistant chief's house.
No. You're totally safe.
Too. Yeah. He's leaving for Hawaii today. He's gone, man. What a day to have the big one.
Yeah. No, you're good. I completely understand. And so, from our youth, we're actually letting society and culture tell us how to actually dictate our relationships rather than sometimes work things through, because of what we're seeing in social media, movies and all that, when I think really staying in love requires a commitment. So my wife uses this phrase sometimes, and it really works. She says, sometimes I feel love you, and she goes, today I just choose love you, which defines where I am that day, okay? And she'll do this all the time. I mean, she'll do it, she did it last week. Whatever the scenario is, sometimes she'll go, babe, I just feel love you today. And then sometimes, if I've made her mad or done something, she's like, I just choose love you. That's it. That doesn't mean we're getting divorced. Doesn't mean, or our relationship's tanking or anything like that. But what it's doing is defining where we are, and it helps us so much, at least to know. Because our commitment's there. We're not going anywhere. We are committed to work things through. But it takes work. And so coming to conflict's a very difficult thing in relationships. If you think an average percentage of couples fighting, maybe 10-15% is probably healthy. You're going to be in a relationship, you're going to fight. It's impossible not to. Whether you resolve it or not is up to who? Both parties. And so that's the work that requires it. And because it just has to be worked out. So coming into conflict, but can you imagine a couple that's actually fighting 30, 40, 50%? That's every other time. That is, you're not even at 80 or 90 thinking, oh, that's when a couple will get divorced. No way. Couples get divorced at 40, 50% now. Because they're fighting every other day, they're sick of it. And a lot of times they circle around the same issue, right? And so nothing's getting resolved. You ever fight and get more stuff thrown at you? Or the same stuff? And so the important aspect is closing the issue on the door. You ever come home and your spouse is just hot and you don't know what is going on, but you feel like you've done something really bad. And so they're barking about something. And I mean, they're just ticked. But you're taking the heat and you're trying to assess it like you would in any situation that you walk into here at the department. Did I do something? Did something go on? Do we need to fix something? You guys are all getting your calls now. See ya.
Come on, Brian. Go bye-bye. You go outside? Okay. Come on.
And so my wife and I use this simple tool and technique, I think, that actually works tremendously when it comes to fighting with each other, is if she's coming at me and there's some heat there, and I feel like I did something, we seriously clarify this every time. I immediately say, are you venting or do we need to fix something? Because if she says she's just venting, because it feels like she's attacking me, although she's not, I'm trying to clarify what it is. If she says she's just venting, what do? Yeah. All right. I don't have to worry about it. Say anything you want, any way you want. I feel good. Now, if she says we have to fix something, that's a whole nother scenario.
Pull the nail out of her forehead.
It's not about the nail, Brad.
I agree.
That's what
No, man. With your spouse, you never, I mean, and almost never give them advice unless they ask. It's almost a red rule. You can give advice sometimes, but almost never. Because most of the time, we're just venting. Or something like that. You don't ever try to fix it. And it's a bad scenario when you start trying to fix them, their job, whatever else goes on, you know, and then it gets really bad. But I think, so clarifying those conflicts, understanding when you're insecure versus it's, you know, it's a problem. I'll give you this one last scenario. My wife and I, when we got married, I grew up in an alcoholic family. Both my mom and my dad drink. My dad stopped about, 12 years ago. My mom stopped when I was about 8 or 10, somewhere around there. I can't quite remember. But so I've never had a desire to ever touch this stuff just because of the memories of my family. I have no religious discrepancy for it. People want to have a beer, I don't care. I have stuff in my house, but I just don't drink because of the memories of it. So when I met my wife, what was the first question I asked her? Do you drink? What did she say? No. Now her family's casual drinkers. And so I'm thinking, no big deal, she doesn't drink. So about 2 years into our marriage, we go to her family's house. They ask us for a drink even today, every day, and I just don't drink. And so she picked up a drink and took a drink. 2 years into our relationship. Dude, she could tell something was wrong with me. Nobody else could, because it's that relationship, right? I was ticked. And inside I am like burning up because I'm like, we clarified this. We get home and she's like, what is wrong with you? I go, you told me you didn't drink. And now you're drinking? She goes, I just took a drink. I go, we clarified this. This was very, very important to me. And now I'm mad. Who has the problem? Her or me? You. Right. What's my problem? Controlling. It can lead on controlling, but that's not the problem. It does lead on controlling. Those are how you control it, right? You control whatever you feel by controlling people or the environment. I'm insecure. What am I insecure about? What am I afraid of? Yeah, see, it comes down to my fear, like this. It comes down, I'm afraid my wife will be an alcoholic and I'm married to an alcoholic now. And so, but it comes out, but what do I do in the midst of that is I push all my heat on who? Her. It's about her. It's about we clarified this. It's about you told me this. See how those fights just play out like that rather than clarifying? If I just stop and take a moment and say, why am I mad? What's going on in me? What am I doing wrong? Is there something I'm insecure about? Which who wants to ask that question, right? Especially when you're ticked. But then I just self-evaluated and I'm like, wow, it's me. It's not even her. I'm the one with the issue. And so to this day, she chooses not to drink out of my insecurities. She could have a drink if she wanted. I probably wouldn't react the same way. But she's like, you know what? No big deal. So out of my own personal baggage, she takes care of me. When that's relationship. It's all selfless. And so I appreciate you guys, like Roy, if you guys ever have any issues, I don't understand what you guys go through on a daily basis. You know, and then your interpersonal relationships with your spouses when you go home, our relationships there. You know, I know we're available to chat with you at any time. It is what we do. We deal with a lot of marriage. Roy deals with a ton. He is like a guru at it. He's excellent. And so please take advantage of him on a personal level if you ever have anything. That's what I do for Weaver Fire. I believe that's what he does. We want to take care of you too. Life is difficult. It takes a tribe to keep a marriage together today. It takes a tribe. And everyone needs each other to keep things going strong. And we haven't heard anything, trust me, that's going to be new. We just want to give you tools and other tools that perhaps that we know to help you guys succeed in your relationships, where we fail and where we also have victory both. So, any questions?
Yeah, we're not here to fix anybody.
No.
Whatever can help.
Yeah.
We're happy to help.
No, even just a listen.
We need as much fixing as anybody else. So.
Yeah, just call my wife. I'll give you her number. Oh yeah, she'll tell you. Any questions?
Just a comment, Jimmy, on this, you know, I read 5 Love Languages literally when it came out like 20 years ago, and it helped me so much in my relationship with my wife, because I was just telling Brett, my wife and I, our two top love languages are totally different. Mine's words of affirmation and physical touch, hers is acts of service and quality time. I mean, they're not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, so understand that, because like Jimmy said, you have a tendency to give your love language.
Yep.
So I'd give my wife words of affirmation, she didn't care one lick about what I say. It's what I do.
Yeah, I had this, that's so true. I had this one couple say to me, you know, well, you probably have heard it too, you know, they've been married for like, I don't know, 10, 20 years, and they get divorced, and in the midst of the divorce, one of them is saying, well, you've never loved me, and the person says, well, I've done this, 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 and this, right?
Yeah.
What are they really spelling out?
What they need.
Yeah, one's spelling out their relationship, and the other one's saying, well, that's not mine, and that's why I'm done with you, because they never connected. That's how important it is, though. It's important to know it in your spouse, because it goes to the core. It's not just something you do, it's something you need to know, because it maintains that relationship, and it keeps it strong, helping to divorce-proof it.
I can certainly look at some of these things, and when we were talking about words of affirmation, and you said, you know, you say love you, or love you, you know, you say it in text messages, you say it in phone calls and things like that, and sometimes without other things, and this might just be my own my own life coming out here. Words of affirmation don't mean anything without other, to me right now.
Right.
I mean, but it kind of seems like probably got bigger problems to worry about just right now.
That's good.
We love you, Scott.
Scott,
we love you.
Read it.
Brad will give you Snickers and a kiss again.
Want me to bring you a gift,
Not the
Scott?
chocolates.
Oh, man.
We have a ambulance out there.
Well, who brought him
And
to the
this is
fire?
how we take care of one.
Awesome, Oh, shoot.
I tried to
Guys,
give
thank
you a
you so
hug
much.
here.
Appreciate the time. Thank you, guys.